Hello, and welcome back to the Striha Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Parker Striha, and on today's episode, we are going to be discussing my winners and losers for the 2022 NFL Combine. I'm by no means a professional, but I do love talking about sports, so thank you for joining me. So this video is going to be my winners and losers for the Combine that just ended this past weekend. Other people are going to have different thoughts and opinions on a lot of the players that I mentioned, and they may have my winners as losers and they may have my losers as winners. That's just how life works. People have different opinions on stuff, and I didn't mention every single player in the draft because there was a lot of players who I did think raised their stock a lot, but I only listed maybe 8 to 10 players that I think raised their stock the most, and I think who could really see a round jump, if that makes sense. Like, these guys could be fringe second round picks, but they had a great combine, so now they're first round picks or something like that. And with the losers, they could be guys who are projected to go top 5 who will now go 15 to 20 or anything like that. So I'll kind of explain when I get to every player and why I think they were a winner or loser. So starting off with winners, I have Christian Watson, a wide receiver for North Dakota State University. He is a 6'4" wide receiver with 10 1/8 inch hands, and he showed out at the Senior Bowl after not having crazy stats at NDSU, who is a really run-heavy team. But yeah, he went out to the Senior Bowl, really showed out during practice, really proved a lot, and then he went out during the Combine and ran a 4.36 40-yard dash, which is the 6th fastest amongst receivers this year. He had a 38.5-inch vertical, which was 6th highest amongst receivers, and he had an 11'4" broad jump, which ranked first amongst all receivers this year. So I think he is a winner simply because FCS guy, you don't really hear a lot about FCS players most of the time, and then when Christian Watson comes out and does what he did at the Combine with that 4.36 40 and the really impressive jumps at 6'4", teams are going to value that. They're going to value the speed and the size and his ability to go up and get jump balls. I think he was a guy that at the beginning of the year didn't really get a lot of love, and then as the year went on and the Senior Bowl happened, he was starting to get more attention and was mocked as more of a second to third round pick. But I think this combine really pushed him into late first round, if not like 15 to 25-ish. I can see him going top 20 now simply because of the size and the speed put together that not a lot of receivers in this draft have. My next winner is Jordan Davis, a defensive tackle for the University of Georgia. Davis is a 6'6", 341-pound monster on the defensive line, and being that big, you wouldn't expect him to run or jump as fast or as far as he did. He only came out in the Combine and ran a 4.78 40-yard dash at 341 pounds, which was the second fastest amongst defensive tackles, only behind his teammate Devontae Wyatt, who ran a 4.77. He had a 32-inch vertical jump, which was also second highest amongst defensive tackles. And then he had a 10'3" broad jump, which was the first amongst defensive tackles. So you wouldn't really expect a guy of his size. Like, he's a mammoth. He's massive on that defensive line. You wouldn't expect a guy of that size to go out and run a sub 4.8 40-yard dash and then put up the jumping numbers that he did. I mean, at Georgia, obviously, you knew he was good. I'm pretty sure he got the award for best defensive player in the nation or something like that. I know he got some defensive award for being just absolutely crazy. But yeah, he came out and he absolutely showed out at the Combine. I think he was already projected to be a first-round draft pick, but I think the Combine pushed him up from a potential 15 to 25 range to potentially a top 15 pick. And if you're Jordan Davis, you should be really proud of what you did at the Combine because you just made yourself a lot of money, because there are a lot of teams that could use a monster on the defensive line like him. My next winner is Jordan Davis's teammate, Travon Walker, a defensive end for the University of Georgia. Travon Walker is 6'5", 272 pounds, so he is also a really big human being. And during the combine, he went out and he ran a 4.51 40-yard dash at over 270 pounds, which was the third fastest defensive end 40-yard dash time. He then went out and had a 35.5-inch vertical jump, which was the 11th highest amongst defensive ends. He had a 10'3" broad jump, which was the 6th farthest amongst defensive ends. He had a 6.89 three-cone drill, which was the second fastest amongst defensive ends. And then he had a 4.32 20-yard shuffle, which was the fourth fastest amongst defensive ends. So like Jordan Davis, Travon Walker came out and just completely blew everyone out of the park. Obviously, he wasn't first in anything, but when you're a guy that's 6'5", 272 pounds, and you're running a 40-yard dash that's faster than some running backs or some receivers or really any of these skill positions that are based on speed, you're going to raise a lot of eyebrows and you're going to have a lot of people looking at you. He was arguably one of, if not the best player on that defensive front for the Georgia Bulldogs. The argument can be made for a lot of guys like Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis, or Nakobe Dean, but I think Travon Walker was arguably the best when you look at how athletic he is at that size. And I think with the performance he put up at the combine, I think he probably just put himself in the top 10 when it comes to the draft. And that's crazy for a guy that at the beginning of the year probably wasn't even looked at as a first or second round pick, maybe, to potentially going top 10 now. Because I think teams are really, really going to value that athleticism that he does bring to the field with the size that he also has. Because if you can have a guy that's that big running that fast, it's going to be really hard for offenses to stop him or to even neutralize him. My fourth winner is Troy Anderson, a linebacker for Montana State. So another FCS guy like Christian Watson, except he plays on the defensive side of the ball. Troy Anderson is 6'3.5" and he weighs 243 pounds. So he's also a really big guy coming out at the linebacker position. He came out and he ran a 4.42 40-yard dash, which was the fastest linebacker 40 time. And I don't really know if that was expected of him. I don't know. I mean, I watched FCS football this year, but I don't really know what was expected of him during the combine. And he came out and just really got a lot of eyes on him, which is going to increase his draft value. I mean, he might not have even been considered to be a day 2 pick, and now he might be an early second round pick or even an early third round pick with that size and that speed. But he also did have a 36-inch vertical and a 10'8" broad jump, which were very impressive for him. He actually did go to Montana State, I believe, as a quarterback, and then transitioned to linebacker, where he showed out. He had a really great year this past year, and now he's going to get drafted a lot earlier than a lot of people think he will. Next, I have Trevor Penning, an offensive tackle for Northern Iowa, so another FCS team. Trevor Penning is also another monster of a man. Penning is 6'7", 325 pounds, so that is a huge left tackle, because I believe he will play left tackle in the league depending on what team does draft him. But for being that big, he came out and ran a 4.89 40-yard dash, which was the fourth fastest offensive lineman 40. And for him to be 6'7", 325 pounds and run a sub 4.9 40, that's almost unheard of. Like, you don't really think a guy that big is going to run that fast. And there were guys that ran faster than him, but I also don't think the guys that ran faster were as big or bigger than he was. He also had a 28-inch vertical and a 9'3" broad jump to go along with a 7.25 three-cone drill, which was the fastest offensive lineman, and then a 4.62 20-yard shuttle, which was 12th fastest. He was already projected to be one of probably the top 3 or 4 offensive tackles drafted this year, but like with a guy like Jordan Davis or Travon Walker, he really put himself, I believe, in the top 15 this year. He could potentially be a top 10 pick depending on how how desperate these teams or some teams are to get a starting left tackle, because I think they're going to start flying off the board. But after Penning, I don't really know if there's going to be any other first-round offensive tackles, so I can see a lot of teams trading up to try to get him and maybe overdrafting him. Next, I have Pierre Strong, the running back from South Dakota State University. So another FCS guy, which seems to kind of be a trend on this list. Strong is 5'11" and 207 pounds, so he's kind of a stockier running back. But he came out, had a 4.37 40-yard dash, which was tied for first amongst running backs. He also had a 36-inch vertical jump and a 10-foot 4-inch broad jump. Both were tied for sixth amongst running backs. And he also looked really great in the drills. So I think he really put himself in that upper echelon of running backs in this draft with guys like Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall. So I wouldn't be shocked if I would be shocked if he somehow snuck into the first round. I don't think that's possible, but I can see him being a really early second-round pick or even a late second-round pick or an early third-round pick. I think out of a lot of these guys on the list, he raised his draft stock the most, because although he may have been like a 4th, 5th, 6th-round pick, he easily just put himself in the day 2 consideration. There's going to be a lot of teams that are looking for a guy that can do what Strong did, so I wouldn't even be shocked if he's taken super early in the second round. And my next winner is Trey McBride, a tight end from Colorado State. McBride is 6'4", 246 pounds, so he's, I think, a little bit on the short side for tight end. I don't know. I think it just depends on the team. Some teams value that super tall tight end. Guys like Zach Gentry, who I believe is like 6'8", Donald Parham, who was 6'8", I think. But not a lot of guys are that big. But Trey McBride, I think, was already considered one of the top tight ends in this draft. But he raised his draft stock in the combine. He came out, put up 18 bench press reps, which was 7th amongst tight ends. He had a 33-inch vertical, which was 8th amongst tight ends. And he had a 9-foot 9-inch broad jump, which was tied for 6th amongst tight ends. So he didn't run the 40, which was kind of sad. I kind of wanted to see how fast he would run. But he did really good in the drills. He was really smooth, caught the ball really well. And I think a team is really going to value that. So I can see him sneaking into the first round, although it would be late. But I do think he is probably going to be an early day 2, early second round pick probably, because teams are really going to value what he brings to the field. Next, I have Ahmad Gardner, a cornerback for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Sauce Gardner came out and he absolutely blew everyone away. A corner that is 6'3", 190 pounds, should not be running a 4.4 140-yard dash. That's ridiculous. The guy is 6'3" and he's running a 4.41. Although it was the 12th fastest amongst cornerbacks, not a lot of those guys running were even close to as tall as he is. So I think with Derek Stingley not doing anything at the combine, Ahmad Gardner really just solidified himself as the number 1 corner in this draft class. So he will most likely go top 10. I don't think there's any way he slips out of the top 10 unless something crazy happens, like an injury, which, knock on wood, I hope doesn't happen for his sake. But I think a guy that didn't allow a single touchdown in college is easily going to go into whatever team that drafts him, and he's going to be either number 1 or number 2 corner, and he's going to lock down whatever side of the field he is on. Next, I have just simply cornerback needy teams. This year's combine, there were a lot of cornerbacks that tested really well. Guys like Kaiir Elam from Florida, Chase Lucas from, I believe, Arizona State, Roger McCreary from Mississippi State, I believe. And then there's obviously other ones, but those are just the 3 big ones that I listed. There's a lot of teams that need corners, and now with a lot of these guys testing really well, those teams aren't going to be pressured to taking a corner in the first round. They can wait until the second or third round, and they can still get a really solid player. And my last winner were linebacker needy teams. Like the corners, there were a lot of linebackers that tested really well at this year's combine. There were guys like Troy Anderson, Quay Walker, Channing Tindall, Christian Harris, and Brandon Smith that came out and just completely blew up the combine. They did amazing. So, I mean, that could be a bad thing for certain linebackers in this class that now they're not going to be drafted as high. Guys like Nakobe Dean or Braden Smith. Brandon Lloyd. Braden Lloyd, I mean, that's his name, not Brandon. But, I mean, these guys coming out and performing as well as they did is really going to, I think, keep teams from drafting a linebacker in the first round because they know they can get someone really solid in the second, third, fourth round, just like the corners. So, I mean, like I said, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing for certain players. Moving on to my losers. My first loser is Nakobe Dean, a linebacker for Georgia. Nakobe Dean is 5'11", 229 pounds, so he's a little undersized, I think, but the guy's crazy. He has sideline-to-sideline speed, and I think he was the key piece of that Georgia defense this past year, but he didn't compete at the combine. I don't really know why he didn't compete. I couldn't find an injury or anything, so I think he might have just opted out, and he'll probably do some stuff at his pro day, unless he's just relying on his tape to keep his draft stock really high. But I think he's a loser simply because of a lot of the linebackers that did test well. A guy like Nakobe Dean could have been valued at a top 15, top 20 pick, and now with all those linebackers being drafted, the value of the position is going to drop, so he might not be drafted as high as he'd like, simply because teams are going to be able to get a really good linebacker in the later rounds. Next, I have Kyle Hamilton, a safety for Notre Dame. He is 6'4", 220 pounds, and he is a physical freak on the back end of a defense. However, he only ran a 4.59 40-yard dash, which was, I believe, second to last among safeties. So you'd really like to see him run a little bit faster, and hopefully he will at the combine, or at his pro day, I mean. I did hear some stuff about an injury causing him or giving him trouble, a knee injury giving him trouble, but I don't know how true it is. I didn't really see a lot about it. I just saw some people talking about it. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't think he was really going to be, I mean, he was projected to be a super high pick, but safeties aren't super valuable in the draft. They're not going to go super high. I mean, Jamal Adams was, I think, kind of an outlier on that. But Kyle Hamilton, he did perform really well in the tests, like vertical jump, broad jump, 3-cone, and 20-yard shuttle. He did really well. He was a top 5 safety in all of those tests. But with him not performing well in the 40-yard dash and some questions about the value of the position, I think he's probably going to end up falling in the draft, which is not good for him. But there's not really a lot he can do now unless he performs super well at his pro day. Next, I have Derek Stingley Jr., a cornerback for LSU. The 6', 190-pound cornerback was arguably the best corner in this draft from the time he stepped onto the LSU campus. He was projected to be a super high pick as a freshman because of the insane freshman season he had, but he didn't compete at the combine this year. He didn't compete. I believe he's recovering from Lisfrank's injury that he suffered during the season. But I do think he will compete at his pro day, which is really good because teams will get to see him run. But I think he's a loser for from the combine simply because, like with Nakobe Dean, a lot of players at his position did really well at the combine, so teams aren't going to be pressured to draft him super high. He'll still be a first-round pick. He'll still probably be a top 15 pick, but a guy that was projected to be a top 5, top 10 pick is likely going to fall a little bit simply because teams aren't going to be pressured to take a cornerback in the first round. Next, I have Myjai Sanders, a defensive end for Cincinnati. Sanders came to the combine at 6'5", 228 pounds, so super light for a defensive end. And he really did not perform very well. He had a 4.67 40-yard dash, 33-inch vertical, 10-foot 10-foot broad jump, and a 4.37 20-yard shuttle. At 228 pounds, you'd really like to see that 40-yard dash time a lot lower, especially with guys like Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, Travon Walker not being that far behind his time, and all of them being 50 to 100 pounds heavier than he is. So that's not really, it does not look really good for him to be 228 pounds and slower than guys that are almost 350 pounds. But I did see that he had apparently lost a lot of weight due to an illness, and that's why he was as low as he is. But regardless, he didn't perform very well in any of the tests, really. So it'll be interesting to see where he does get drafted, because the combine did not help him whatsoever. He might have interviewed well, and it'll be interesting to see what he does at his pro day. But just based off of the combine, I think he's a loser for the draft. Next, I have Treylon Burks, a wide receiver for Arkansas. Treylon Burks is 6'2", 225 pounds, and going into the combine was argued by some people to be the top receiver in this class. They had a lot of them had him being the first receiver taken in mock drafts, and I think he really hurt his stock when he competed. He had a 4.55 40-yard dash, which was tied for 21st amongst receivers. He had a 33-inch vertical jump, which was tied for 24th amongst receivers. He had a 10'2" broad jump, which was tied for 21st amongst receivers. And he had a 7.28 3-cone drill, which was tied for 10th fastest amongst receivers. He was expected to perform a lot better than he did. And with a lot of receivers performing extremely well, guys like Christian Watson, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks probably isn't going to be drafted as high as he'd like, because this combine did not look really good for him. So it'll be interesting to see if he runs at his pro day and see how it all unfolds going into the draft, because his stock, I think, just tanked really, really hard. I feel bad for him, but there's not a lot he can do now unless he performs super well at his pro day. Next, I have Andrew Booth Jr., a cornerback for Clemson. Booth is 6 foot 194 pounds, and he also did not compete at the combine due to a quad injury that he suffered. And he may not even be able to compete at his pro day with the quad injury still lingering. They don't know if he'll be fully healthy yet, and obviously that quad injury is his top priority, because you don't want to rush back and hurt yourself more, because that's going to hurt your draft stock even more. But I think a guy, he was projected to be a first-round pick, and I think not being able to compete at pro day or combine are really going to hurt that. He's still obviously one of the best corners in the draft, in my opinion, but it will be really interesting to see where he goes just based on the injury and not being able to compete at all these tests. And my last loser is Tyler Linderbaum, the center for Iowa. Linderbaum is 6'2", 296 pounds, so he is a bit small for an offensive lineman, and there have been a lot of questions about his size, because a lot of linemen aren't less than 300 pounds, so you'd really like to see him put on a little bit of weight if possible. But he also didn't compete at the combine due to a foot injury that he suffered in the Citrus Bowl a couple months back. I don't know if he'll be back for his pro day. I'd like to see him go out there and compete just to try to keep his draft stock high, because he is arguably the best interior offensive lineman in this draft. But I think he's most likely going to fall, probably not out of the first round, but fall picks. Like, he could have been probably a top 15 pick, and he might not go until the 20s now, just because of his size and him not competing at the combine. But as always, I am your host, Parker Striha, and this has been the Striha Sports Podcast. Our random sport fact of the day is that in the year 2000, the Los Angeles Chargers rushed for 1,062 yards as a team. There were 19 rushers that year that had more yards by themselves. As always, thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for whenever a new video gets posted.